Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This week I'm talking to Hayley and Samuel from the Facing It podcast. It's a podcast that gives the mic to those who have faced mental ill health and stigma head on and gets them to share their stories in the hope that we can get to a point where we normalise this conversation around mental ill health. It's a really great podcast. I highly recommend that you check it out. In this episode, I chat to them about where the idea came about, their experiences when it came to mental ill health, and the plans that they have for the podcast moving forward. I'll link their details in the show notes if you can check it out. As I said, I highly recommend that you check them out. But anyway, here's the episode. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. Today I'm talking to Samuel and Hayley. I'll get them to introduce themselves very quickly.
I am also, that's very enthusiastic. I'm Samuel. I am a co-host at the podcast Facing It, which gives the mic to those who have faced mental ill health and its stigma head on. That's kind of like my night job. In my day job, I'm a youth mental health researcher at the University of Sydney, and a former National Mental Health Commissioner as well.
Nice.
You're important.
I don't know.
Follow that up, Hayley.
Oh, jeez. Hello, I'm Hayley. I am the other half of the Facing It podcast with
My
Sam.
work life.
Yeah. Which is, like Sam said, that's also my night job. I also squeeze in being a mum somewhere in there and a wife and a few other bits and pieces. And during the day, I work in financial services. I am a project manager.
Consider me topped.
So, obviously, I've got these two fine people on the podcast this week to talk about their podcast. The word essential services is thrown around a lot as of late. And if essential services was a podcast, their podcast would be the essential services of podcasts. So everybody out there, you need to listen to it. We're here talking about it. Guys, the podcast, where did it start? Whose idea was it? I want to know, like, sort of from the beginning, how did it come about?
What a great question.
Yeah. I think it started so it was probably 2 years ago, right? When we were, Hayley and I were applied and were accepted to be a part of the very first cohort of the Australian Mental Health Leaders Fellowship, which was run by the National Mental Health Commission and Melbourne University. And a whole bunch, like, put a room of strangers together all talking about mental health, and barriers come down and you get to know each other quite well. And I think it was probably halfway through the first residency that Hayley and I wrote down and practically signed, like it was like a declaration of a commitment, that we were to have an Oprah style chat show about mental health. Hayley's recently found this document.
I have. It does exist.
And then I think it was Hayley was in Washington last year, and
Yeah.
around September.
I was at the International Mental Health Leadership Exchange in Washington, D.C. with my 6-month-old baby at the time. Don't recommend that for anybody out there who is thinking about that. And I was sitting in the ballroom of the Hilton downtown D.C. and I texted Sam, which would have been the middle of the night, Australia time.
I was awake.
With a scribble on a napkin, and I said, "Hey, I've got this idea and I think it's got legs. What do you reckon?" And that was September last year, and we recorded our first episode in March 2020. So that's where it all started.
So for you to you're very passionate about talking about the things that you guys are talking about on the podcast. For you guys, where did that passion begin? Where did it start? Where it was something that you really wanted to help the community by talking out more about mental ill health?
So something we're both very passionate about, and if you've ever listened to any of our episodes, you'll hear us say it all the bloody time, is that lived experience is the key to breaking down barriers to mental ill health. So we both have a lived experience, and Sam can talk to his
Say it again.
lived experience. So I have I was diagnosed when I was 23. In hindsight, I had been experiencing mental ill health for a long time prior to that. But I was diagnosed with depression and generalized anxiety disorder when I was 23. And that's something that was a completely life-changing event for me, and really set me on a path of trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted out of life and how I was going to live my life as the best version of myself that I could. And then when I had my daughter Matilda, who is just over 1 now, I experienced really severe postpartum depression, anxiety, and trauma-related psychoses. And I think that for me was a really confronting time. I was quite outspoken and I was already involved in the mental health field, and even I felt like I couldn't reach out for help, and that I was struggling, and I was struggling with that myself, and I felt so lonely. And I think part of the drive behind the podcast comes from that, is we can get to people in such an accessible way. Podcasts are free. You can listen to it on your phone from the comfort of your home. And if you can hear about other people's experience and hear stories of grief and loss and hope and resilience, then I really hope that people who found themselves in situations like I did might be able to hear that and learn from that, and find the strength to move forward. So yeah, long answer, sorry.
I was just thinking,
No,
oh
great.
gosh, I better be quick. Not because Hayley took up all the chat space. Similarly, lived experience. So that's it's been. I was actually talking to a friend, Lucy, about getting her on the podcast the other day, and I said I never saw myself hosting a podcast. Saw myself as famous, but just not via podcasting.
Are we famous?
Yeah, I will be. I am determined. And she said, "Well, I mean, that's your life, Sam. Like you haven't really ever. Well, you planned things like that. That don't make me sound reckless, but nothing's ever really been a simple forward movement. So I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after our family went through a house fire, and we were inside the house in 2005. And then after years of battling that and my family witnessing night terrors, that they were like, I swear he was awake, but I was just so, I guess so asleep and so afraid as well, that my cortisols were just through the roof and my eyes were open, and I was doing all sorts of reckless things at the age of 2005. So it would have been at the age of 9 or 10. And that sort of took a few years, and then after that, I experienced severe bullying at school, and it sort of brought on suicide ideation for me, and that's something that sort of has never really left my side, unfortunately. But I sort of take it in my stride, rather, that it's something that I do every day. I deal with every day. I focus. Not on that, but on the positives. And I ended up, instead of going on schoolies or working to earn an income or doing any of those normal post-high school things. Straight after high school, I went into a mental institution where I was institutionalized for 3 months and was abused by my therapist there. And it was something that I sort of was like, I've just got to get past this. Once it was sort of over, I guess, I got to get past this. I got to leave this behind. And then my psychiatrist, who I'm still with and is my best investment I've ever made, more than clothes, more than dogs, like just the most
that's a big call.
emotionally. I think I can make it so far. I think I can make that call. I don't have a child yet. I've got a French bulldog, but he's got moments where I denounce him as my child. She asked me if I wanted to speak at the opening of a Headspace Centre in Camperdown with like Mike Baird, who was the then premier, and one of the prime ministers was there as well. And I sort of was like, yeah, sure, if it helps something. But I never saw it to sort of eventuate to becoming Australia's youngest national commissioner at the age of 20 for lived experience and youth, which was, I mean, that was in itself a whole amazing time. And then to meeting people like Hayley and yourself, Elliot, through these mental health connections, and then becoming a researcher as well in it, which is my second career as well. I've also had a career in design and a pretty blessed career in design after studying that at university. So I think I accidentally went a bit longer than Hayley probably went, even though I set out to go shorter. It just ends up being one of those things where you just end up with verbal diarrhea.
No, that's okay. Your guys' podcast is about getting stories out there, lived experience, trying to create a bit of normality around the subject. Why do you feel as though it's not a topic of conversation that is normal, that we should just be talking about normally? What do you guys see as one of the problems that we do have in this world and society that people don't sort of speak up and aren't open?
What a question. I have some thoughts,
and crack it though.
Yeah, we'll have a crack. I think we've come a really long way as a society. I think 10 years ago, some of the conversations we're having today would not have been socially acceptable. I think that we can say that for sure. And so definitely. I think that typically some of that stigma, if I can use that very general word, that has existed in the community, I think is starting to break down. And I think people are much more open to the idea of mental ill health. I truly believe that a large part of the problem, I guess, if I can say, in today's world around mental ill health is people are scared of saying the wrong thing. People don't know. People have this idea about, something that might have happened in their family. Perhaps their grandmother was institutionalized at a time when practices were very different to what they are today. And that stuck with them. And they don't know any other way to talk about it. And there's not... And I think this is, part of what we're so passionate about in the Voice of Lived Experience is breaking down some of those barriers, some of those myths, like demystifying some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you can hear other people talking about it, then why can't you talk about it? So I think I genuinely think that a lot of people really want to do the right thing and they want to support the people around them and their loved ones, but they don't have the words. They don't have the knowledge. And sometimes lack of knowledge and lack of education turns into stigma. And then that kind of forms this cycle where people are too scared to say something, so they don't. And that then forms a stigma for themselves. And self-stigma is a really, really big problem with people accessing help with mental ill health. And that kind of just goes and goes and goes. And so I think if we can get more stories out there and more people talk about this stuff, people then have the words in their vocabulary to use themselves and they can start talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely subscribe to that. From what I've seen and what I've been able to witness firsthand, read through transcripts or listen to people through not just our podcast, but other sort of varying streams, like conferences and things like that. That is definitely the unknown of, and I guess the consequences or the ramifications or the ripple effect of what you might say, or if you said it wrong, how you might be perceived. And I think what goes so hand in hand with that is self-stigma. And that's something that both Hayley and I have discovered through doing our podcast, is that there has been an element of self-stigma with each and every guest that we've had on, that not wanting to seek help because either my problems aren't as bad in comparison to someone else's problems, or it's not really that bad, that sort of self-blame sort of thing, or they do, like they know they know that I'm this sort of level of unwell with my mental health, and that's, they've accepted it that far, but I don't know how they're going to accept it if I said that I was this next step on, because they might not even accept it themselves. And that's definitely been somewhere that I've been. And Hayley and I were talking about at the end of one of the episodes with an incredible young individual that we both met through AMHLF in Melbourne, Taylor Johnston, and his youth advocacy, and how he specifically talked about self-stigma. And there's times when Hayley and I both sort of hide it from those who are helping us, because we're like, oh, we've already been enough of a burden to this extent. I'm just going to hold this and deal with this as much as I can until I can't, and the box sort of opens, like in Cat in the Hat.
And I think the self-stigma
I think
piece
that's
is
a big part.
exactly like you were talking about, something that self-stigma, there's kind of layers, right? So there's self-stigma when you first struggle and you're experiencing symptoms for the first time and you're thinking, I need some help, I don't really know where to go. And self-stigma will impact that, exactly like Sam said, some of the examples, oh, it's not that bad. What have I got to be depressed about? My life's pretty good, that kind of stuff. But then there's kind of this additional layer of self-stigma, which I think Sam and I both had a lightning bolt moment in talking to Taylor, when he said, when you have a diagnosed condition, generally, if I can use that expression to be a little bit clinical, and when you experience mental ill health, it's not something you get better. You don't do something and then it's like, oh, well, it's fixed and I'll just go. You carry that for the rest of your life and you manage that. And everybody does that differently. And the same thing doesn't always work for the same person one or two times in a row. But what we found really interesting with self-stigma is that, we are both outspoken advocates in the mental health world. And even sometimes we go, oh, no, because if I have to go and speak to somebody, I've taken a step back, or that's bad that I'm struggling again. I shouldn't be struggling again. It's like, wow, that shame, that self-shame around I'm struggling, I should go and get help. I did it last time. Why wouldn't I do it again? It's so complex.
And to be honest,
that was very long-winded.
I haven't worked out where that comes from either, though. I'm going to continue the winding. I don't know where if that's a verb. I don't know where it comes from yet. Like, I haven't really sat deeply with it yet to be able to be like, was I taught this? Have I adopted this from something that I've heard? Is it because I'm my worst critic? Like, where does this source of shame, this almost fountain of shame that it'll find a crack somewhere and it'll pop through and it'll be like, thought you got me, bam, like I'm back, sort of a thing. Yeah, it's one of those things that I haven't really no, I've had time, but I haven't wanted to sort of sit and find the root of why I personally experience shame and potentially why other people do as well.
Yeah.
Did we answer your
I
question or
definitely
not
get
really at
what you
all?
mean.
We've just spoken.
No, that's good.
Did we do a
because,
political answer?
No, that's great because you're just talking about things that you know, you talk about talking to somebody speaking out, like even you guys as advocates from time to time can still have your moments, of oh, maybe no,
Majorly.
maybe, and we can all be like that, definitely. So it's actually good to hear that coming from you guys. Yeah, so no, don't worry. The winding was fine. Don't worry.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't a
Look,
stigma crash tackle.
no, look, and Hayley, you talked about stigma, and I look at it sort of maybe we're our own harshest critics, right? One thing I want to talk to you guys about is the role that social media is having when it does come to the conversation. Do you feel as though positive, negative? I mean, I'm sure you guys have have your thoughts on the role that social media is playing in the field of like mental ill health.
Yeah. I think that it is playing both a positive and a negative role. I was actually, just before COVID-19 hit, I was prepping a keynote delivery for the CAMS conference up in Brisbane. And I sort of centered it around social media. I mean, for youth, that is one of the biggest things that they face in their day is it's anything is delivered through social media. So education, fun, social connection, it's all there. So I think that it definitely contributes to, I think social media absolutely contributes to stigma and what we see is normal in inverted commas for those who can't actually see me doing it. Why I bother doing their hand actions anyways. But I think that it's also, it's one of those things that doesn't fly 100% of the time. I think probably anywhere between 70 and 90% the right people will call it out. People will call it out as body shaming. People will call it out as racism. People will call it out as just being a judgmental pig, for a lack of a better term. And there's great movements happening in the forms of destigmatizing, and I think not just within mental health, but within everyday or life challenges that mental health underpins and that could lead to mental health. So there's a great she's an activist, she's a co-founder, she's a TV personality, and she is an actress, Jamila Jamil, and she does a podcast called I Weigh, which is one of my favorites to listen to. But she started the company I Weigh because of social media and basically comparing women to a body, a scale size. And it started off with the Kardashians, and they are these, she admits, and I think they are as well, these incredibly outgoing, driven business women who are women of color, with their background, and they're women, at the tops of the Forbes list, you know, and having such a successful career. Yes, part of that has been through a reality TV show, but I think that's been sort of the catalyst to their pure or their stardom, or I guess their fame. But she spoke about how she saw an Instagram post that it wasn't even saying anything about what they achieved in their life. Not that they were mothers, that they were sisters, that they were daughters, that they they were on the Forbes, 30 under 30. They were like none of those sorts of things was it actually listing, but it was listing what they weighed and what their waistline, their bust line, and their posterior line was. And Jamila was like, I can't, this is just disgraceful. So she created this account called I Weigh, where individuals go on and they post a picture on social media, and I Weigh reshares where they say what they weigh. And they weigh, some people weigh their trans diversity, some people weigh their nationality, some people weigh their kids, their grandparents, some people weigh their animals, some people weigh their creative skills, how good they are at their job. Like, it varies immensely. Some people also weigh at their social. I saw one the other day where someone said that they weighed their social awkwardness, and I was like, yes, owning it. Yeah, you are. So I think that they're, I guess, reducing it to a short-winded answer, it's again with the winding, is that I think it does both. There is push and pull. I think that the push to exit it out of the realm is far greater than the pull of it.
Everything Sam said. I'm scared shitless. Sorry, can I swear? I'm scared a lot.
Go for it.
I'm scared a lot.
I'm scared a lot. Twitter scares the pants off me. Like,
that's a whole other piece.
It's a completely destructive space. Exactly what Sam has said. I think social media can be so wonderful, and the opportunity for it to do great things is so great. I think people can be real jerks. And I know for my mental health, I have to step away. I had to uninstall the Twitter app on my phone because I just couldn't. And I think that the role social media plays is only going to be bigger. As our kids get older, and how they interact with social media will be completely different to the way that we did. And I think that the best thing that people can do when it comes to social media and their mental health is recognize their relationship with it. And if it is a destructive one, being able to recognize that and see what it is or isn't offering you. And if it's not giving you joy, if it's not bringing you positivity into your life, then you need to find a way to be able to step away from that. And that's easier said than done, but that's
that stuff.
Yeah, does not give you joy.
If it doesn't
throw it
joy,
out.
Toss it.
Yeah, but I mean, but for some people that can be very hard, because you're talking about something that everybody is on. It's probably, if I can use the example, at work, I don't have many people's mobile numbers to contact, but I'm friends of a lot more people. So the way I contact them is through Facebook, so, so it's easy to say, oh, get rid of it. But it's like, well, this is the only way I can contact. But at the same time, I think about some of the things I see, Hayley, you talk about on your Facebook, where you will jump on to Facebook and talk about how, you'll talk to somebody and they'll feel as though they're failing as a mother because they saw a post or something that says, like, they should be doing things this way. And I think you were talking about how the person felt like they were doing a bad job because they weren't sort of fitting this picture perfect way of being a mother. Or even just recently, you're talking about you're just not feeling it with being a mother, like stuff like that. Like, I think there's good in social media and just bringing honesty out so we can just actually accept it. But unfortunately, there is the negative side where people are very judgmental. people like to tell you how you should or shouldn't be doing things, and if we can try and
Mhm.
eliminate that sort of side of things and bring out more of the positives, I think we'll be in a better place.
Totally. I think you can't control what everybody else says or thinks. At the end of the day, it starts at home, right? And I think that's something, like you said, I'm very passionate about talking my truth, and it's not always pretty. Usually it's not very pretty at all, actually, particularly when it comes to motherhood. And I think
You're lucky you've
that's
got a pretty face.
geez, I don't know about that. But, I think that's a small step that, we can do to do some of those things we're talking about is, using the opportunity that social media gives us to break down some of those myths and bring a bit of truth to the platform, I think is a really powerful way to connect with people.
Yeah, and I completely agree. To add on to that, we've seen it especially in the last few weeks with the Black Lives Matter protests happening either physically or digitally. That it is a space that if you take it on as an individual, it is a space that you can help change. It isn't like global emissions and global warming where 100, I found this out the other day and I was absolutely shocked. 100 companies are solely, just these particular 100 companies are solely responsible for 70% of the emissions, the pollution stuff. I'm not an expert in that field, but that really shook me. I was like, imagine if just those 100, like I could count to 100 within, well, maybe 100 seconds, maybe, yeah. But like, imagine if within that time you could get those 100 companies to stop or to change their ways. And so I guess what I'm saying by that is like, it's not like that where there is a large portion of these small-minded organizations or individuals that govern it. We all each individually govern our own social media feeds, who we interact with and everything. And like you were saying, Elliot, that includes work, that includes family, that includes home. And if we each took that responsibility on to make the world a better place by starting from home, being your digital home or your physical home, then we can make such an impact by turning the conversation to be promoting realness, not faux life or reality.
Yep, 100% agree. So you guys have the podcast. What's been the reaction that you've had to the podcast? You've got a few episodes up. What's the reaction been from people listening as well as friends or family? Have you had people that have maybe not been so positive towards it? What's the experience been like so far?
It's been good. I think we've had one 3-star review on iTunes that I noticed today. The rest have all been 5 stars. Not that I'm checking in. And that's totally fine. That is so fine. Both Hayley and I were talking about it this morning as I was driving, and we were saying that ultimately we've started out and we've set this out to be a soapbox that individuals can stand upon and tell their truth. And the validation that they receive is not from us, not from our listeners. The validation we aim for them to receive is purely from just being able to have a platform to put their voice out there and their story out there in the hope that it helps someone. And every single guest that we've had so far has been of that mind. The judgment, positively or negatively, that any listener chooses to have on our podcast or an individual's episode of the podcast, that's their own call. And they're entitled to that opinion. As much as that pains me to say, in the case of it being a negative incidence, they're entitled to that, but it doesn't mean that they need to be anything to the individual story either. we found that Twitter was a really hard nugget to crack, and we were reprimanded for something that we put on Twitter that perhaps we could have explained a bit more, or I guess, there was. I think it was just. I don't really know totally, but I know that it rubbed someone else up the wrong way. And it's and we haven't taken the post down or anything, because we've taken it as a learning experience, and we've invited the individual, because she's an amazing woman and a formidable woman with what she's overcome and what she continues to overcome. But for us, there's been learnings, both positively and negatively. Like that we were speaking before, listening back to our episodes, learning what we need to, when we need to keep our mouth shut, and when we can and are along freely, or learnings from a certain individual's story that apply so deeply to our own lives, or if it is that Twitter learning where we are getting input about what we're producing from other people, and that's great. Like, it was at first a chafing lesson, but it's like any lesson is a good lesson, no matter what way it comes about. So my mum's only just tuning into it this week. She's had an excuse though. I know, Jennifer Hockey. She's had an excuse. She's been studying super hard, and it's now her semester break. So she's been doing a couple of episodes a day. So God love her. Cool. And I think it's been received pretty well, which I'm really pleased about.
I think we've gotten there's been some really specific examples where people have reached out to us. I had a guy. We're collating them to stick in our scrapbooks. A guy I used to work with, an amazing guy, super fit young guy. He's like, he does Ironman events. I don't even know what you call them. It's amazing. And
the Ironman thing.
He listened to our first episode with Brett Saunders, who is an absolutely incredible gentleman who we learned so much from. And he talked in his episode about anxiety and about how his anxiety felt. And this person that I worked with reached out to me and said, I've just listened to that episode. It's made me reflect on how I'm feeling. I went for a coffee with my friend that we had planned to do anyway. And what we spoke about was how I've been really struggling with anxiety, and I've never told anybody before. So thank you for giving me the words. That's the good stuff. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that would be worth it too. Like, you can experience, the negative, but really, like, the whole purpose of what you guys are doing is not for people who may not even like what you're doing. It's more for the people like Hayley, you said, the person at work that listened to it and was able to actually use it, and that positive experience from it. That's, I guess, who you guys are looking to reach.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those stories that we hear back, we're able to experience that feeling of freedom and that feeling of elation because we've been there. And I think that it goes back to that very first point of lived experience, baby. Like, that's where the magic is. It's it helps empathy. Your EQ grows immensely. I mean, maybe your IQ does as well, but definitely your EQ. And it helps us just to be more human and relate on a purely human basis of just experience with each other. And that's what's been so magical.
Yeah, definitely. I guess Hayley would agree with you on that, no doubt. So, so with the podcast, you've had a few interviews already. what's the plans for the podcast moving forward? Are we just going to be looking to just interview as many people as possible? What's sort of what does the
That is a big
foreseeable
part.
future look like?
That is definitely a big part. We would love to do this forever and speak to as many people as we could. I think something that's really important to us is showcasing that mental health is the great equalizer, that it doesn't discriminate. Mental ill health, it doesn't see race, it doesn't see gender, it doesn't see what you do for work, it doesn't care what language you speak at home. It's the most normal thing. And so, part of what we really want to do is we want to be able to represent the entire community, whether that be people from a different culture or race, different genders, different geographical locations, whether you're regionally based or city based, and understand what those challenges look like to those people in that circumstance and hear their lived experience from that. Because I think it's really important that people can hear something they can relate to, but also see a person they can relate to as well, not in just their mental ill health or what they may have experienced, but also their home life or their work life or whatever the factor may be. So I think we certainly want to ensure that we can accurately represent the diversity of our community in what we do and who the people we speak to are. I think there's a few kind of harebrained ideas in the works around things that we would love to do. We would love to partner with some really amazing organizations in the mental health space to do some work there. And, we've definitely got some aspirational goals. I think one of the big
Watch
things
this space.
watch this space. I don't want to, tell you all our dumb ideas before they're, just a napkin with some writing on it. But I think the other really big thing that we're really keen to do is start to demystify the mental health system. So there's people who exist within the system, calling Lifeline. Like we spoke about in your episode, at the bottom of a news paragraph, they might say, please call Lifeline if you're struggling. We know that people don't call Lifeline because they don't know what to expect. There's all these ideas out there. If I call Lifeline, are they going to send the police to my door and they're going to take me to hospital? Like, we want to start to break down some of that as well in terms of the system so people can understand what they're in for. If you put your hand up and you say, I'm not okay, this is the support you can get. And this is
someone going to come out to you, or is someone going to leave you to out to dry?
What are your rights within the system? If you don't feel like you've been given the opportunity you deserve to manage your own mental health, what options do you have? Like that, I think that's something we'd really like to explore further and help to break down some of those misconceptions, I guess.
It is absolutely our goal to destigmatize and demystify, to encourage help seeking, and to also encourage early intervention. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that can help with someone facing mental ill health is getting in early, nipping that on the bud, making sure that the right support is around you, that's all there. And for us, that is as much a focus as amplifying the voice of lived experience is that, so that if an individual listening to our podcast or your podcast or any other podcast or conversation or TV series or song that reflects their current mental state, and they feel that they need to seek help, or they know someone that needs to seek help, we want to make sure that they have, like Hayley said, they have their knowledge of their rights within the system. They have their knowledge of what to expect, who to expect, how to expect it even, and what does it feel like when you're going through that. I can still remember the first time that I called Lifeline, and it was so nerve-wracking because I sort of had a rough idea, but I was also like, I have no clue what could happen. I don't know if the other person on the end of the phone knows me, or if I know them, or like there were so many things going through my mind. So for us, I know we've just used the Lifeline example, but there's Sane, there's Beyond Blue, there is so many services out there that have a callback service as one example of this help seeking services that we want to demystify. And we've got some ideas that are currently coal that we're hoping to turn into diamonds, but we haven't. They're still being cooked.
Yeah,
they're still being compressed.
Look, as I've said a few times already, the great thing that you guys are doing is, giving a voice for people to share their lived experience. Another thing that I think you guys are doing really well is on your Facebook page is the information that you guys are sharing. It's educating me definitely, but there's just some really great stuff there. I strongly recommend people to follow them on Facebook. Tell me, guys, in terms of the information, even for someone who may be looking to maybe look into things a little bit more, what would you say would be some of the best sort of sources of information that are available to us to learn more about mental health?
I think for me, it's a project that I was a commissioner on, is Head to Health. And it was conceived by the Department of Health as this, as we knew it before the name sort of became Head to Health. So to us, it's still the digital mental health gateway. And that name to me, or that code name, or whatever you want to call it, it's almost like the medical name of something, or the scientific name of something, like when it's in
the
Latin
name.
but then yeah. So I'll talk to you in Latin for a little bit. The digital mental health gateway is essentially that. It is a gateway that connects you to services. At the moment, the services that are on there are all government funded, but they're all your big ones that you know and see, and it links you straight to those. And it's embarking on changes. So I'm working with the I always get this acronym wrong. It is the Australian Commission for Quality, Health and Safety. So I'm working with their digital branch, their digital sort of section on digital mental health qualifications. So almost like a heart tick approval. So that you know that when you're accessing a service, what that service, has it got this tick of approval? Even if it doesn't have government funding, it can have a tick of approval. What does that tick mean? Does it mean it's been co-designed or built with lived experience? Is it research based? Is it a callback? Like what is it? And so those will then appear on there, and so it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's continuing to do so. But for me, that's if you're looking for deep knowledge, that is number one place to go to, and also for seeking service access. Otherwise, our socials are pretty lit, if I do say so myself. We try and, with our they've been called resources, might I say, and I fangirl over that very highly as a researcher. They provide a lived experience view and an understanding from lived experience, but also just a generalized understanding of what something might be that someone is facing. So, and they change week to week. They're if anyone's clued in, they're kind of like a lead up to the episode. So, and what we will discuss in the episode. So, we've done self-stigma, and we talked about self-stigma with Taylor. We talked about first responders and trauma, and then that led on to our episode with Vivian Thompson. And we've done multiple ones like that where it is the lead up to it. And for us, it's actually so thrilling to do it, because Hayley, is just amazing with sort of just word vomiting onto the page and being able to make it so understandable. I'm equally brilliant creating the visuals,
Naturally.
and we just back ourselves 100%. And we're like, this is what people have experienced. We've experienced this. We know this, that our guest speaker this week has experienced this personally and speaks to it. So other people must. And if we get that out there, then we can help demystify, destigmatize. We can help. We can encourage that help seeking and help offering behavior. We can do that through that. So it's sort of very much where it's at. But head to health or head to our socials. That was such a plug.
Good plug.
Yeah. In fact, it is plug time. So, for people who would want to follow you guys, let us know where's the best places that they can connect with you guys.
Absolutely. So if you go to our website, which is www.facingitpodcast.com, you'll find a link to our blog, all of our episodes, and all of our socials. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, recently Pinterest. We're not very good at that though, so probably don't go there.
No, and LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, but we haven't advertised Pinterest or LinkedIn, so we're nutting those out. But on all of them, we are just the handle is Facing It Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to keep it as simple as possible, and we've also got a link to, I think you said it, Hayley, but just in case you didn't, we've got on our website, we've got all the streaming services that you can pick your fave. There's a couple that I've never even heard of, but we're streaming on there.
What even is Breaker?
Breaker, oh man, and Radio Republic.
No idea.
Hats off to you though, thank you.
Yeah, no, look, thank you so much, guys, for coming on. I feel as though we could probably talk for longer, but I think it's probably best that we end this sooner rather than later. As once again,
I think that is a good move.
Yeah. Once again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate and love the work that you guys are doing, and I strongly recommend anyone who may be listening to this to head over and check them out, facingitpodcast.com. It's just one of those things where these two people are looking to make a positive impact on the world, and I think the more people we have like this, the better this world will be.
Oh, thanks, Elliot.
Don't make me cry.
I mean it, guys.
That's so lovely of you. No, that's seriously so lovely of you. And likewise, if you're on Elliot's podcast and you want to hear more from Elliot, head over to our podcast and you can hear about Elliot on our episode. It's like
podcast Inception.
Very much. Yes, I've gotten very much into YouTube lately, and YouTube channel's doing this Inception thing. I'm in love. So I'm so glad that we get the chance to do it.
No, I've had fun. Thank you once again, guys.
Pleasure.
No, thank you, Elliot.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please share, leave a comment, hit the subscribe button. I've got a whole heap of videos on the channel where I've chatted to a lot of great people. So yeah, if you could, that'll be great. And so I hope to catch you on the next episode.